One, two, one, two, three.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having a great week. Okay, we are back for our Harry Potter reread series, and today we are going to be talking about Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the book and the movie. I've got a lot of thoughts about book 3, a lot of things that I forgot. But before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe because it'll really support my channel. Also, I want to do a little shout out. I got my t-shirt on from the Wizarding Trunk, my Charms Club t-shirt. So we're going to go ahead and get started on book 3. Okay. So I have to say, I think book 3 to movie 3 is where they really started taking a lot of liberties. And I don't know if this is because they changed movie directors. I feel like movie 1 and movie 2 were pretty consistent with the books. They decided to take out certain aspects, which I totally understand. But with book 3, I felt like they left out a lot, the movie, left out a lot of really important content. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's funny, because I haven't read the books in so long, I actually, whenever I would watch the movies, I would always put on movie 3, and I think it's because of how fast-paced it is. I also love that they're getting a little bit older. I also love the time travel. So movie 3 was one of my go-tos, but now after reading the book and watching movie 3, I'm like, oh, I get why people are so upset when they talk about movie 3 compared to all the stuff that's in the book. So let's go ahead and go in. I've got my little handy-dandy notebook of all my notes. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about, in the movie, we open the movie with him trying to read and play with Lumos Maxima under the sheets, and Uncle Vernon comes in and sees what he's doing. But there's this whole section of his friends sending him birthday presents, and he's celebrating another birthday alone, and it just really shows how miserable he is with the Dursleys. No, I think the whole thing with his aunt was pretty on point, of him blowing up his aunt, he leaves, and the night bus and all that kind of stuff, but there's something about the long distance of their friendships that I was missing in the movies, and it could have, taken 2 or 3 things, even a pan of just all the birthday presents with note cards of who they're from. I don't know, just something that I thought would have been really nice to include, which I loved reading about in the books. In the book, they talk about that the Muggles know about an escaped prisoner. They don't know it's Sirius Black, but they know some concept or idea that somebody's on the loose and they need to be careful, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know why they didn't do that, especially because there are a lot of Muggles who know about the wizarding world, of people who are born, wizards who are born to Muggle parents. So I thought that that was really interesting, and I totally forgot about that aspect. The other thing that I guess didn't have any recollection about was Sirius Black's whole reason for going to Azkaban. They don't really explain it well in the movie as much as they do in the book. He was said to have killed 13 people, and there was an explosion, and he was the one that sent Voldemort to the Potters, and there's just so much meat I find that's not in the movies. And then you get to movie 5 where everything's fine, but Sirius had friends, and so I don't know why they didn't come forward for him. I don't know. The book does a much better explanation of explaining who Sirius Black was, what ended up happening, all that kind of stuff that we don't get in the movies. Another thing that I want to talk about that I really enjoyed reading in the book, so when Harry gets to the Leaky Cauldron, he actually has a week before Ron and Hermione show up where he gets to explore Diagon Alley, and he goes into the different shops and he buys different things, and he goes back into Gringotts. Now I know that that's a whole nother set thing that they would have to film, but the only sort of freedom we get of him in the movie is him playing with the Monster Book of Monsters, which I get, but after reading the book, I'm oh, it would have been really nice to see him try to be a wizard on his own for a week without supervision in Diagon Alley. Again, budget, timing. It was much easier to film him in a bedroom for a 1-minute segment than to the whole set of Diagon Alley. But I thought that that would have been really nice to include, and I wish that they would have done that in the movie. The other thing, in the movie, they have Mr. Weasley going right in and telling Harry, just to be careful of Sirius Black. Whereas in the book, there's a whole scene, a whole fight scene between Molly and Arthur Weasley of whether or not he deserves to know. And I thought that that was really interesting because his whole life, no one's ever told him the truth about anything. They've always kept everything hidden, yet it seems like he's growing up so fast, like he fought Voldemort in the first book. So I don't know why all of these like adults were like, we have to just keep this hidden from him. And so Harry in the book ends up overhearing all of this information about Black, and you know, that's how it happens, instead of like Arthur Weasley being like, he's gonna come for you, you can't go, don't go looking for him, which I guess is more direct and to the point, and like propels the story more for the movies. But I don't know, there's an element of like, he's never been told the truth about anything, and so like that contributes to why he like is always so upset when he finds out things about his life. Another thing that I thought was interesting, which I talked about in books 1 and books 2, they sort of like kicked Neville out of like the group. So Neville was in the train car with them when the Dementor comes and Lupin does his Patronus. You know, in book 2 and book 1, there's also like several like big action scenes where Neville was a part of it, and they kicked him out of the scene to just make it be the trio, which I think is interesting. I understand why. But it seems like the book was more of like an inclusive, like it wasn't just about the 3 of them, it was about like his whole experience at Hogwarts with all of the people that he met, all the students and all the teachers that he met while he was there. Oh, something else, which again, I think it was really cool in movie 1, and we wanted to be introduced into Transfiguration, which I totally understand, but McGonagall doesn't transfigure from her cat to human until book 3, and in book 3 there was this whole thing of like, this normally gets applause when I do it, and you're taking away my shining moment, which I thought was really funny. But I get why they did it in movie 1, because we want to be introduced into the world of Harry Potter, and Transfiguration is one of those things. So I totally understand why they did that. Oh, another thing, which again, I totally understand if you watch the behind the scenes about how they made the hippogriff, Buckbeak. It's so much work, but in the books there are so many hippogriffs when they go down and Hagrid does his first lesson. There's so many of them, which like would be crazy for them to try to CGI all of those with the amount of effort that it took to create Buckbeak in the first place. So I actually do prefer just the attention on Buckbeak. I think that the relationship there is stronger than having multiple hippogriffs. Okay, so this is another thing. I feel like they also, I mean, Malfoy's in it a lot as like the evil, like annoying villain, but he also knows so much more about Harry's life than the movies show. And so Malfoy talks a lot to Harry in code, being like, well, I would want revenge, and I would go looking for Black, because he knows the whole story of what happened and Harry doesn't. Again, I feel like if they included that in the movie, it would play into like how unclear Harry is about everything that has happened in his life. And so I kind of wish that they included that. 1 or 2, and again, these are all things that are like 1 or 2 lines. It doesn't need to be an entire scene, but I think it would have added to the drama of Sirius Black. Another thing that I thought was interesting that they did in the movie, Harry didn't engage with the Boggart, because I think Lupin was afraid that it would become Voldemort. So I thought that that was really interesting, and they actually had Hermione do it, and Hermione's Boggart was Professor McGonagall telling her that she failed all her exams. And I thought that that should have been included too, because it shows Hermione's fears. You know, Hermione's really adventurous in these books, and her fear is being disappointed or disappointing her teachers, which I think is a really big character thing for her. Another thing that I thought could have been like a 1 or 2 like line scene was the fact that Snape was making Lupin's Wolfbane potion. So Snape knew the whole time, and it also shows his like annoyance with Lupin. He gets to be the defense against the dark arts teacher, and Snape doesn't, and he has to make this potion and for him to be able to teach at the school and not transform into a werewolf. Something else I want to talk about, they introduced characters like Cedric and Cho Chang in book 3, and they actually ended up doing multiple Quidditch matches against them. And I feel like in movie 3, we only got the 1 Quidditch match where the Dementors come and he falls and the broom breaks. But it ends up being like a whole thing where like Cedric is involved, and then Cho Chang is involved, and they're like constantly battling, and then Gryffindor wins the House Cup. So, I'm sorry, Gryffindor wins the Quidditch Cup, so they sort of like got rid of all of that, which I understand, and I'll talk about what I wish they would have done at the end, but yeah, so that was something that I kind of missed. The other thing too is like all the information that we get when Harry is in the invisibility cloak and he overhears McGonagall in the movie talking about all the stuff about Sirius Black. what actually happens in the book is they're at the tavern and Harry, Hermione, and Ron are hiding under the table and they hear so much more. There's the Fidulius charm. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but basically it's that Sirius was the Potter's secret keeper and he was supposed to keep them hidden and he was the one that gave it to Lord Voldemort. Like there's all of this like information that they don't talk about. They talk about the Godfather, they talk about Peter Pettigrew, but I don't know. I feel like the meat of the movie and the book is about Sirius Black, so I feel like we should have just gotten so much more information in the movies about exactly what happened, so that when he is sort of, we flip it and it turns out that Sirius is a good person, that like redemption is stronger. I don't know. When I watch the movie, I'm like, I don't know that that redemption is earned, because we haven't been given the full story, in my opinion. Other things that we were missing, Sirius gave Hagrid that motorbike that Hagrid uses to drop him off at the Dursleys. I thought that that was really important. Sirius was there the night of the murder and Hagrid was like soothing him because I guess Sirius knew that something was wrong. So it wouldn't make sense that Sirius would go to the Potters if he knew that they were going to be murdered. So I think that's all really important information. The other thing too is that Sirius is in Harry's parents' wedding photo, which Harry has in that book, and I thought that that would have been really important to show Sirius not in that crazy Azkaban uniform. The other thing too, I feel like they really messed with the timeline of the movie. Harry gets the firebolt for Christmas and they end up having to check it for like charms or whatever because Hermione has a hunch that Sirius Black sent it to him to try to kill him. So he uses the firebolt and that's what ends up breaking instead of him getting the firebolt at the end of the movie, which they did in the movie. Another thing that I thought was interesting, and I know that they did Christmas in movie 2 and movie 1, but this Christmas in movie 3 or book 3, only 13 people stay and they have like a 13-person dinner. Something else that I thought was interesting, Harry uses his Patronus charm during the Quidditch match because the Dementors come, but it's actually Malfoy and all of his like partners that are trying to prank Harry during the match. So it works, but it only works because they're actually not real Dementors, which I thought was kind of cool that he was able to use the charm during a match. So they sort of like got rid of that as well, which I kind of get because it makes in the movie, it makes the like really big time that he uses it at the end to get rid of all the Dementors more like gratifying. So I totally get that sort of choice. Something that I thought was funny, I think they made this a blooper or like a deleted scene, but Sirius Black is able to get into the common room because Neville loses all of his passwords. Again, I feel like we lose a little bit more of like Neville being this like clumsy kid who can't remember the passwords. But I think they did film that scene as a deleted scene. Something else that I thought was interesting, I talked about how like I love that like movie 2 was like Ron and Harry and then movie 3 was like Harry and Hermione, but in the book it seems like Harry and Ron stopped talking to Hermione for like a good chunk of time because of what she did, bringing the fireball to McGonagall and having her like check it out, and like Hermione's trying to be really protective of Harry and Sirius and like trying to make sure that they don't do things like sneak out and do all those things. And in the movie, Ron and Hermione are actually like pretty close and they go to Hogsmeade together, but in the books, Harry and Ron use the invisibility cloak and the Marauder's map and they go without Hermione. So Hermione's not really involved and Malfoy catches them with the invisibility cloak, and so finally Malfoy like realizes that Harry has that invisibility cloak, which I thought was kind of interesting for him to catch him because in the movie they don't catch him. Harry just scares Malfoy and his friends. Again, something that I talked about in all of the movies, whereas like in the books, there's so much more information about like the stress of exams and school, and I feel like I get it. You want the action packed and you want the storytelling of the like relationships in the movie, but there's like a lack of like they're actually at school, like they're at school to learn things. I don't know. I feel like there's more emphasis on that in the books. And that's all I say. I don't know if I have an opinion about it either way, but I feel like you learn more about what they're learning about as opposed to the movies. Okay, let's talk about the end of the movie. So as I'm reading and I'm getting towards the end of the book, I'm like, where is the time travel? Where is the time travel? The time travel is really only like 2 chapters in this book. And I feel like it's like 45 minutes of the movie, which before I reread, I kind of loved the time travel, but now that I've reread, I'm like, oh, okay, so the time travel is important, but it's not as important as they made it. Like, the whole movie, they were like this emphasis of like, when did Hermione get here, and this and that and this and that, and I like totally understand, but there was so much meat to what happened with Sirius and Lupin in the Shrieking Shack, and I when I rewatched it, I was like, okay, well, it is a pretty long scene, but I don't know that we learned all of the information that we needed to learn. For example, Lupin is the one that sees Pettigrew on the map, not Harry. So Lupin was the one who figured it out and ended up telling Sirius, and that's why Sirius kept going for Ron and the Rat. Sirius, James, and Peter Pettigrew were all animagus. So they would transform, or they became animagus to help Lupin with his transformations. Another thing that I thought was interesting, Dumbledore planted the Whomping Willow for Lupin. And in the books, you know that one of the entrances to get to Hogsmeade is through or underneath at the base of the Whomping Willow. But they did that so that Lupin could get to the Shrieking Shack in order to transform, and all the screams and all the haunted like stories were actually Lupin transforming into a werewolf because Dumbledore wanted him to learn how to be a wizard. I think this is all really important information. It also shows like Lupin, Sirius, James, they were all really good friends. And even Peter Pettigrew, they thought that they were good friends. And so, like, when you watch the movie, you're like, oh, Pettigrew's like this weird character. Of course, he would be with the Dark Lord. Well, no, he actually really betrayed them. They were all, like, good friends. And they made a really strong relationship in the movies with Harry and Lupin. And I feel like because they did that, it was a disservice to Sirius when he learns all of this information about Sirius Black. Also, like, Crookshanks was involved. He was the one that stopped the Whomping Willow. The movie, they did this whole sequence with the Whomping Willow flying Harry and Hermione through all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I just feel like we kind of wasted time with that, and we should have really had, like, I want to say like a 7 to 8 minute scene in the Shrieking Shack where we learn all of this information, because then when you go and watch the other movies of like Sirius being this like kind person, Harry's godfather, you know, I feel like it would have been a stronger impact. I mean, that when Sirius dies, it is horrible, but I think it would have been even more emotional. And I feel like when I read that, it's going to be even more emotional having remembered all of the stuff that happened with the Secret Keeper, and they changed the Secret Keeper to Peter Pettigrew, and, you know, there's so much information that I think we were missing. And I say that because then we spend 45 minutes with the time travel, which, like, is fine, but that's not really what the book was about. That was, like, so that they could save Sirius and save Buckbeak, but we spent all this time with the time travel in the movies, and I'm like, I don't know. Also, what I thought was interesting, Hermione was there with Harry and Sirius when the Dementors came, so she experienced that as well. I think, you know, they did well with Harry going and, you know, being his father and doing his Patronus, but I don't know. I feel like I would have wanted more meat and more info in the movies about the redemption of Sirius Black, because you also don't get any of that of, like, who killed who with the 13 people that he killed and why he ended up in Azkaban and who caught him and all that kind of stuff. How he escaped. Sirius talks about how he escaped as the Animagus, as the Grimm. We don't get any of that. I don't know. I just think that that was all such important information that I wish the movies would have done. The last thing I want to talk about is that Sirius sends him a letter after he's been freed, and he signs the Hogsmeade form, and I think that that is so important because it shows, like, that he really cares and that he wants Harry to, like, come live with him. Obviously, that doesn't happen because he's on the run again, but I don't know. I think that that would have been better than Harry getting the fireball and just, like, flying off at the end of the movie. Again, I love the movie so much, so it's funny to, like, semi-criticize because I don't think I've ever really criticized them. But it's interesting. I completely understand when people complain that there's so much in the books that they took out. Again, obviously, these are movies, 1.5 to 2 hours long. You can't include everything. I totally understand that. I think I said this in movie 2. Or book 2, I almost wish that they made it a TV series like Game of Thrones so that each book could have 12 episodes where you can just, you know, take the time to do all of that. Obviously, we weren't in that age of crazy CGI on television shows. You know, this was so long ago. But I don't know. I feel like this was the first one where I'm like, oh, the books are so much better because there's so much that was left out. and in storytelling, not necessarily like world building. So yeah, those are my thoughts about book 3 and movie 3. Let's have a conversation. Leave a comment below. What do you think? You know, I said before, book 1 and book 2, I think really translated well to film with movie 1 and movie 2. This was the first one where I was like, oh my God, they left out so much stuff. And it's also so nice to remember. I honestly feel like I'm like rereading them for the first time again because I haven't read them in so long, and all I've been doing is watching the movies because it's, you know, it's so much easier to watch the movies than to like sit down and read the books. But I'm so glad that I'm doing it. I absolutely love the world, and those are my thoughts about book 3. If you guys have any comments or questions, please leave a comment below. Again, before you go, please don't forget to subscribe because it'll really support my channel. I'm in the middle of book 4. We'll watch movie 4 and we'll be back for our Harry Potter reread series. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we will see you guys in the next one.